We were the galaxy's quiet children. For millennia, we listened to the whispers between stars. We heard the grand conversations of ancient races. They spoke in gravity waves and modulated nebulae. Their words were entire star systems. Their arguments spanned the life of suns. We were observers. We lived in our small corner of the void. Our signals were tight beams. They were careful and meek. We did not want to bother our elders. We did not want to interrupt their grand debate. But silence is not a virtue forever. Being ignored is not a state of peace. It is a slow and creeping death. Our art was unseen. Our science was dismissed. Our philosophies were considered quaint. The great races saw us as fleeting sparks. We were cosmic mayflies in the great dark. So we made a choice. We would not whisper anymore. We would not wait for an invitation to speak. We decided to shout with the voice of a sun. We would carve our name into the fabric of space itself. We found our canvas in the void. It was a star named Caliban's Fall. The name was an old one from our forgotten histories. A blue supergiant, old and angry and unstable. It burned with a desperate fury. It was a titan nearing the end of its long life. For 1,000,000 years it had dominated its sector. Now it was a time bomb waiting to detonate. It was beautiful and terrible. A perfect instrument for our plan. Our probes watched it from a safe distance. They measured its shuddering breaths. They tracked the storms on its churning surface. Caliban was our inkwell and our pen. Its inevitable death would be our moment. A supernova is the ultimate act of creation and destruction. It forges new elements in its heart. It scatters them across the cosmos. We would not just watch this one. We would guide it. We would command it. We would turn its final glorious scream into a message. A message so loud it could not be ignored. A message so clear it could not be misunderstood. The dying star would be our voice. The plan was called Project Starlight. When our leaders first heard it, they called it insane. They said we were trying to tame a hurricane. They said we were ants trying to redirect a flood. The resource cost alone was staggering. It would take everything we had, every ship, every gram of fuel, every brilliant mind we possessed. The risks were beyond calculation. One misstep and our entire civilization could be crippled, or worse, erased by the very fire we sought to control. But we argued with passion. Humanity was not born from caution. We left our cradle world on impossible dreams. We crossed the dark between suns on a prayer. We built cities in the void with sheer belief. Audacity was in our blood. It was our greatest strength and our most profound flaw. This was not just a project. It was a declaration of our existence. We would rather burn brightly for a moment than flicker unseen for an eternity. The vote was close. So close it made history. In the end, the dreamers won. The call went out to every human colony. It traveled to mining outposts in distant asteroid belts. It reached terraforming crews on newborn worlds. It echoed through the great orbital cities. The call was simple. We need you. We need your ships, your minds, your courage. We are attempting the impossible. We are going to write on the sky. And the response was a flood. From the core worlds came the great science vessels. Their halls were filled with our best and brightest. From the outer rims came the hardened asteroid miners. Their ships were tough and built to endure. Freighters emptied their cargo holds. They filled them with fuel and shield components. Luxury liners were stripped of their comforts. They became barracks for thousands of engineers. Even solitary prospectors answered the call. Their tiny ships were mere specks in the void. But they came. Every brave soul rallied to the cause. Our entire species gambled on this one single act. We knew the stakes. We were risking everything we had ever built. For one chance, just one, to finally be heard. Our task needed tools that did not exist. A supernova cannot be contained by normal means. You cannot build a wall around an exploding star. So we had to think differently. We had to work with the forces of creation. We needed to shape gravity itself. Our engineers and physicists worked for years. They filled entire worlds with their calculations. They argued and designed and dreamed. The result was the gravity projection engine. It did not create gravity. It focused it. It bent it. These engines were massive. Each one was the size of a small moon. They were forged in the hearts of automated shipyards. They were powered by contained singularities. They were the most complex things we had ever built. The instruction manual was mostly theoretical physics and a few pages of frantic prayer. We built hundreds of them. We mounted them on our strongest ships. These became the sculptor fleet. They were our chisels for carving a masterpiece from chaos. Our tools were built from theory and sheer will. We gathered in the empty space near Caliban, a safe distance away, or so we hoped. Our fleet was a sight the galaxy had never seen. Thousands of human ships in a single formation. Warships stood beside science vessels. Tiny couriers darted between massive freighters. The sculptor's ships were the heart of the formation. Their dark hulls absorbed the light of distant stars. We formed a ring of steel and purpose, a circle hundreds of thousands of kilometers wide. From a distance, we looked like a second nebula, a man-made constellation of lights. Our combined presence was so great, it created a gravity shadow. We blotted out the stars behind us. We were a wall of human intent in the empty night. For weeks we drilled. We practiced our maneuvers. Every ship had to move in perfect sync. A symphony of thousands of instruments, each one playing a critical part. The tension was a living thing on our ships. You could taste it in the recycled air. The coffee machines worked overtime. Nobody was getting much sleep. This was the greatest thing we had ever done. Then the message came. It was not a tight beam signal like ours. It was a whisper that touched every ship at once. A ghost in the machine. It came from the Elder Ones, the ancient races who governed the galaxy's affairs. Their message was simple and cold. Abandon this foolish game. You are children playing with cosmic fire. You do not understand the forces you are touching. Your star science is flawed. Your actions risk a cascade failure. You could disrupt the galactic balance. They did not threaten us directly. They did not need to. The condescension was its own kind of threat. They had watched civilizations rise and fall. We were just another momentary flicker to them. They told us to go home, to return to our quiet corner of space, to continue our silent observations. They said there was no shame in knowing our place. But their words had the opposite effect. They did not fill us with fear. They filled us with a cold and quiet rage. Our place was no longer acceptable. We sent a single, simple reply, no. And so it began. The first sculptor ship powered its engine. A low hum vibrated through our fleet. It was a sound deeper than hearing. You felt it in your bones. On our screens, we saw nothing. But our sensors showed a river of focused gravity, a gentle but irresistible force. It reached out across millions of kilometers. It touched the outer layers of Caliban's fall. We were not pushing the star. We were tuning it. We were adjusting its vast magnetic field. Another engine fired, then another, then a dozen more. This was the first note in our cosmic symphony, a slow and careful preparation of the instrument. We had to calm the star's outer storms. We needed to create a stable shell. This would contain the initial blast for a few precious seconds. It would give us a chance to shape the explosion. This was the most delicate part of the plan. It was like performing surgery with invisible hands. One wrong move could trigger the star prematurely. But our calculations held. The star's chaotic energy began to organize. We had laid our first touch upon the canvas. We felt the change deep within the star first. Our seismic probes registered the tremor. The core of Caliban's fall had used its last fuel. The delicate balance of fusion and gravity was over. Gravity was now winning. The core began its final, shuddering collapse. It was a process that took only minutes. But on our screens, it felt like an eternity. We watched the heart of a giant die. A wave of unimaginable density crashed inwards. Elements heavier than iron were born in that moment. The star flickered. The light from its surface dimmed for a second. The galaxy held its breath with us. There was no turning back from this edge. The collapse reached a point of impossibility. Then, it rebounded. The shock wave from the rebounding core hit the outer layers. The final heartbeat of Caliban was complete. The star was now a detonator. In a few seconds, it would erupt. Every system on our ships went to full power. Shields glowed with contained energy. The air was filled with the hum of readiness. We were about to look into the furnace of creation. The star erupted. It did not explode like a bomb in space. It was a silent and terrible flower of light. It bloomed in an instant. A wave of pure energy and radiation washed over us. It was brighter than 1,000 suns. Our view screens went pure white. Alarms shrieked on every bridge. The fire wave hit our shields with unimaginable power. Our ships groaned under the strain. The universe itself seemed to scream. We were surfing on the edge of a god's wrath. For long seconds, we were blind. We could only trust our instruments and our training. Power was rerouted to failing shield sections. Coolant was pumped to overheating systems. We held our position. We had to hold it. We were a ring of defiance against the storm. The fury of a newborn nebula washed over us. It was a force that could crack planets. But our shields held. Our will held. Then, as quickly as it began, the initial wave passed. Our screens cleared. Before us was a sight no human had ever witnessed. We were inside an expanding cloud of creation. Now our real work began. The expanding nebula was our clay. Our gravity engines were our hands. The command went out. Engage. All at once, the sculptor's ships fired their engines. Not with gentle force this time. They fired with the power of chained black holes. Beams of focused gravity lanced into the cloud. They were invisible, but unstoppable. They began to herd the incandescent plasma. They pushed and pulled on the expanding gases. We were painting our masterpiece in the cosmos. It was a chaotic and beautiful dance. Ships moved in perfect coordination. One squadron would push a wall of hydrogen. Another would carve a channel through glowing helium. We were sculpting with light and gravity. The nebula was still expanding at incredible speed. But we were faster. Our gravity lenses focused and bent the material. We worked against the clock. In a few hours, the nebula would cool. It would become too diffuse to shape. We had one chance to get this right. We were no longer just star sailors. We were artists. The work took 17 hours. 17 hours of perfect focus and execution. Finally, the last gravity beam shut down. The fleet fell silent. We had done it. We pulled our ships back to a safe distance. Then we turned our telescopes to our work. It would take years for the light to reach other systems. but we had our own probes positioned far away. They gave us the first look at what we had made. The image that came back filled every screen in the fleet. And for a long moment, there was only silence. The nebula was no longer a chaotic cloud. It was a shape, a perfect and undeniable symbol. We had created a geometric model of a hydrogen atom, a single proton at the center, a single electron shell in a perfect orbit around it. It was the simplest element, the foundation of everything. It was a symbol any intelligence would understand. It was not a word of aggression. It was not a claim of territory. It was a simple, elegant, defiant message. We are here. We understand the rules. Now we are a part of the game. For 10 years, the universe answered with shocked silence. Our message spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. The Caliban Nebula, as it was now known, was visible to everyone. The Elder Ones said nothing at all. We monitored their ancient communication channels. They were completely quiet on the matter. It was the loudest silence we had ever heard. Their complex star science had said it was impossible. Their models had predicted our own destruction. They had called us foolish children, and we had proven them wrong. We had not used weapons. We had not conquered a world. We had simply performed an act of creation, an act they themselves had deemed impossible. The galaxy began to treat us differently. Ships from other, younger races would alter their course. They would fly by our systems slowly, with a new kind of respect. We started receiving invitations, not to grand councils, not yet, but to scientific exchanges and cultural meetings. Our silence was broken. Our isolation was over. The game had changed. We became the people who signed their name with suns, the race that turned a supernova into a greeting card. It was a joke we told ourselves, but it was true. We had touched a fundamental force of the universe. We had bent it to our will, and we had done it not for war, but for art. It changed how we saw ourselves. We were no longer the quiet children. We were a people of audacious dreams. We had looked into the heart of a star and not flinched. We had faced the void and carved our identity upon it. The Caliban Nebula became a monument, a pilgrimage site for our children. They would look at the glowing clouds of hydrogen. They would see the perfect shape we had made. They would remember the day we gambled everything, the day we risked our entire existence, all for the chance to say a single word. Hello. We were no longer galactic newcomers to be ignored. We had touched infinity. We had earned our place at the table. We thought the silence of the Elder Ones was the final answer. We were wrong. Then, a new voice came from the dark. It arrived 11 years after our great work. It did not come from the direction of the Elder Ones. It did not use their ancient gravity languages. It came from the opposite side of the galaxy, from a region we thought was empty and cold. The signal was something new, something elegant and strange. It was a tight beam aimed directly at our home world. It was not a message of warning. It was not a message of judgment. It was a simple, geometric pattern, much like our own. But it was not a hydrogen atom. It was a pattern of far greater complexity, a molecule we had only theorized about, a structure that should not exist in nature. It was an answer. And at the end of the message was a symbol, a new one. It showed another supernova like ours. But this one had been shaped into a question mark. The message was clear. What you did was impressive. Now, what else can you do? It was not the elders who had finally answered us. It was someone else entirely. And they were inviting us to play. We first saw it on a Tuesday. The universe does not care about our calendars. It simply is. We were at the Far Reach Observatory, a quiet outpost on the dark side of Luna. The coffee was bad. The silence was perfect. That's when the alert chimed. It was a soft sound in the sterile calm. A star, designated KIC 8462852, was behaving oddly. Its light was dipping. This was not unusual. Planets crossing a star can cause that. Dust clouds can too. But this was different. The dip was too deep, too sharp, and it was not alone. The star flickered. It was like a faulty lamp in a vast dark room. Except this lamp was 100,000 times bigger than our own sun, and it was nearly 1,500 light years away. There was no natural reason for this. We watched for days. The flickers continued. They were not random. They felt deliberate, structured. Someone, or something, was playing with a star. We huddled around our screens. The bad coffee was long forgotten. The silence was now filled with a tense energy. We were staring at the impossible. The pulses from KIC 8462852 arrived as light. But they were more than that. They were data. We pointed every instrument we had at the star. We collected every photon. We logged every single dip in its brightness. The pattern was undeniable. It was not planetary transit. It was not a natural stellar phenomenon. It was a signal. Our best minds got to work. Linguists, mathematicians, and star science experts. They filled entire server farms with the data. They argued in hushed tones in briefing rooms. The patterns were impossibly complex. They were nested layers of prime numbers. They were geometric progressions. It was pure mathematics. The universal language. Weeks turned into months. We built new programs to analyze the stream. We called the effort Project Rosetta. It was a fitting name. We were trying to read a new kind of hieroglyph, one written in the fire of a distant sun. The work was grueling. The pressure was immense. Then came the breakthrough. A young analyst on the Martian colony found the key, a repeating fractal sequence. It unlocked the first layer of the message. We held our collective breath. The data began to resolve into concepts, not words, but ideas. Massachusetts velocity, time. It was a technical manual and a dictionary combined. We were learning a new language, a language of the stars. The moment we confirmed the message was real, truly real, the world changed. The discovery was too big for one team. It was too big for one nation. First Contact Protocol was activated, a dusty document nobody thought we would ever use. It outlined the steps. Secrecy first, then verification, then the hard part, telling everyone. Leaders from every nation met in secret. Generals stood beside philosophers. The mood was electric with fear and excitement. Humanity was no longer the only thinking creature in the void. That truth was a heavy weight. Some argued for a silent response, to listen but never speak. They feared attracting unwanted attention. They said we were children playing with fire. Others argued for an immediate reply, a grand greeting from humanity. They said this was our moment, our ascent onto the galactic stage. The debates raged for weeks. Every option felt like a gamble. How do you talk to someone who can dim a star? What do you say? The first contact paperwork, it turned out, was much more complicated than the manual suggested. We were hopelessly, totally unprepared. Our greatest fear was not that they were hostile. It was that we would say the wrong thing, that our first word as a star-born species would be a mistake. We were a small voice in a vast, dark ocean, and we were about to shout. The final layers of the message were translated. The complex math gave way to something far simpler and far more terrifying. It was not a greeting. It was not a manual for a new technology. It was a warning. The team in the translation room went silent. The triumphant mood evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, heavy dread. The message showed us a map of our local galactic arm. It highlighted a point of origin. Then it showed a trajectory, a path of something moving through the stars. It moved very, very fast. And its destination was unmistakable. It was coming for our solar system, for us. The senders of the message described the danger. They did not use words like ship or fleet. They used concepts, a shape that did not obey physics, a void that consumed light and matter, a force that sterilized entire star systems. It had visited their homeworld long ago. They were the sole survivors. They had fled into the dark. Their message was their final act, a warning flare sent from their exile. They had seen the anomaly change course. They had calculated its new path. It was heading our way. And it would arrive in less than 100 of our years. We stared at the screen. We had found life in the universe. And its first words to us were, "Run." We could not run. Earth was our only home. The colonies on Luna and Mars were fragile bubbles. There was nowhere to go. So we had to choose another path. To fight, to hide, or something else entirely. The world leaders met again. This time the debate was short. The fear was gone. It was replaced by a grim resolve. We decided to answer the warning. But not just with words. We would build our own signal. We would not whisper. We would roar. A message so powerful it could not be ignored. A message that said, we were here. We were alive. And we were not afraid. This was the birth of Project Starforge. The plan was simple in its audacity. It was insane in its scale. We would find a suitable star. A large, unstable star nearing the end of its life. And we would give it a little push. We would trigger a supernova. We would control the explosion. We would encode our own message into its expanding energies. It was the greatest project in human history. A message in a bottle thrown into the cosmic ocean. Except our bottle was a dying sun. To harness a sun is not a small task. It required the total focus of our species. Every nation contributed. Old rivalries were forgotten. We built massive fleets of construction drones. They mined asteroids for raw materials. They built colossal structures in deep space. We called them the stellar engines. They were city-sized machines, designed for the most delicate and dangerous task imaginable. The engines were moved into position. They surrounded a red giant star called HD 161796. It was a bloated, unstable ball of fire, perfect for our needs. The engines would use focused energy beams. They would manipulate the star's magnetic fields. They would stoke its fusion furnace. They would force it to collapse on our command. Generations of workers dedicated their lives to the project. They lived and died in the construction yards of Jupiter. They saw Earth only as a blue marble on a screen. But they believed in the mission. They were forging our legacy. A few of them thought it was funny. We were spending a fortune to blow something up. It was the universe's most expensive fireworks display. But we all knew it was more than that. It was our only hope. Before we could try to control a red giant. We needed a practice run, a smaller test. We chose our closest stellar neighbor, the Alpha Centauri system. Proxima Centauri, a small red dwarf, was our target. It was stable, predictable. If we could make it flare on command, just a little, It would prove our technology worked. The risk was still immense. A mistake could destabilize the entire system. The control room for the test was on Mars. The red dust outside was a fitting backdrop. We were about to play with starfire. The team was the best of the best, the descendants of those who first conceived the project. The countdown was broadcast across the solar system. Every human held their breath. We had never attempted anything on this scale before. The command was sent, a stream of light crossing millions of miles. The stellar engines around Proxima Centauri fired. For a tense minute, nothing happened. We watched our screens. The silence was deafening. Then the star's light began to brighten. It swelled with controlled energy. It pulsed once, twice, 3 times, exactly as we had planned. A cheer erupted in the control room. It echoed on Earth and Luna. We had done it. We had touched a star and made it speak. Not everyone cheered our success. On Earth, a powerful movement had grown. They were the dissenters. They saw our project as the ultimate act of arrogance. They argued we had no right to alter the stars. They called it cosmic arrogance, an unforgivable sin against the natural order of the universe. They were not a small group. They had millions of followers. They protested in the streets of our cities. They broadcast their own messages. They warned that our supernova would not be seen as a call for help. It might be seen as a threat, a weapon. They said we were lighting a fire in a dark forest, a forest full of things we could not imagine. What if the anomaly was not the only danger out there? What if we provoked something worse? Their arguments were not without merit. We had no idea who else might be watching. We were acting out of desperation. The debates became a part of daily life. Families were divided. It was the great philosophical question of our time. Do we have the right to carve our name onto the cosmos? Or should we remain quiet and small, hoping the darkness would pass us by? Then the argument became moot. The long-range sensors screamed. The anomaly had arrived. It entered our system at the edge of the Oort cloud. It did not slow down. It did not communicate. It simply came. It was not a fleet of ships. It was a single object, a perfect, silent shape that defied our understanding. It was a crystalline structure, a kilometer-wide fractal. It twisted in on itself. It folded space around it. It absorbed all light that touched it. It was a hole in reality, a patch of wrongness moving through our home. The warnings from the first message were an understatement. Seeing it on our screens was chilling. The mathematics of its form felt actively hostile to the human mind. Our fleets were waiting, the pride of our united worlds. They were positioned in a defensive line near Jupiter. It was the greatest military force ever assembled. Thousands of ships, millions of personnel, armed with the most powerful weapons we could create. We had to try. We had to show the anomaly and ourselves that we would not die quietly. Commander Eva Rostova gave the order. Engage. The Battle of Jupiter was short, and it was a slaughter. Our weapons had no effect. Lasers dissipated against its surface. Missiles were simply absorbed. The anomaly did not fire back. It did not need to. It continued on its path, and anything that got in its way ceased to be. Our ships were unmade, not blown apart, but erased. Their matter and energy consumed by the twisting void. We watched from command centers on Mars and Titan. We saw flotillas vanish in an instant. We heard the final, desperate comms chatter go silent. The losses were catastrophic. In under an hour, our entire defensive fleet was gone, wiped from existence. Commander Rostova's final transmission was calm. "It's not working," she said. "Starforge is our only chance. Tell them to finish it." Then her signal disappeared. We had met the enemy, and we had failed utterly. The loss of the fleet shattered our morale. Hope felt like a distant memory. Jupiter now wore a new faint ring of debris, the remains of our courage. But grief was a luxury we could not afford. The anomaly was still coming. It moved at a steady pace. It would reach Earth in 3 months. Commander Rostova's last words echoed in our minds. Finish it. In the Starforge Control Center, far out near the Red Giant, the mood was grim, but it was also determined. The failure at Jupiter proved one thing. This was our only path. There was no plan B. The message we would send was no longer just a plea for help. It was more. It was a testament. A story of a species that refused to despair. A final, defiant roar into the dark. We worked faster than ever before. We checked every system. We ran every simulation one last time. We loaded our message into the stellar engines. It was the story of humanity, our art, our science, our history, our love, and our folly. We included the warning we had received. We included the footage of our fleet's demise. We were sending everything. A complete portrait of who we were. A message of hope and a warning for others. The time came. The anomaly had passed the orbit of Saturn. The stellar engines were fully charged. The red giant star was groaning under the strain. It was primed to explode. We sat at our consoles. The final command required 3 separate keys, turned by 3 separate operators, on 3 separate stations, a final safeguard against a single mistake. The system was ready. The target star was aligned. The message was encoded. The universe was waiting. Across Earth and Luna and Mars, everyone watched. They looked at screens showing a distant red star, a star that was about to become our voice. The director of Project Starforge gave the final order. Her voice was steady. The story of humanity is in your hands. Turn the keys. We held our breath across worlds, and we turned the keys. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the feedback from the stellar engines came alive. They poured unimaginable energy into the heart of the star. They compressed its core. They broke the delicate balance of gravity and fusion. The red giant began to collapse. On our screens, we saw the star shrink. It pulled in its own outer layers. It grew brighter, denser, hotter. Then, it erupted. A wave of light and energy burst forth. The supernova was born. It was more brilliant than a galaxy. It was a new sun in the sky. Visible even in daylight on Earth. It was beautiful. And it was terrifying. We had done it. We had ignited a star. We had turned its death into a message. The light from our manufactured nova spread outward. It was traveling at the speed of light in all directions. The initial blast washed over the anomaly. We did not know if it would have any effect. Our goal was not to destroy it. Our goal was to be heard. The expanding cloud of gas and dust was not random. It was structured. It carried the patterns of our message. Our story was now written in fire and plasma. The fall of our fleet, the structure of our DNA, the sound of our music, the words of our poets. It was all there, carried on the wings of an exploding star. For 1,000 years, the nebula would be visible, a permanent monument in the sky, a testament to the small species that dared to speak back to the darkness. We had done all we could do. The universe now watched our creation, and we could only wait. The supernova faded over the next few years. It left behind a spectacular nebula, a cosmic ghost, a beautiful scar in the night sky. The anomaly had faltered in its path. The sheer energy of the blast had seemingly damaged its strange form. It drifted, wounded, past Earth's orbit and continued on into the dark. It did not strike us, but it was not defeated. It was just gone. For now. Humanity lived under a new sky, one with our own handmade constellation. We watched, we waited, we listened. Our great message was traveling through the void. Would anyone hear it? The senders of the original warning were long gone. Were there others? Or had we shouted into an empty room? Decades passed, then a century. We built better telescopes. We scanned the sky with a desperate patience. Generations were born and lived their lives under the faint glow of the star-forged nebula. The story became a legend, a myth, the time when we reached out and lit a candle in the dark. We never stopped listening, but the universe remained silent, a profound, lonely silence that stretched on and on. We had sent our echo into the dark, but no echo came back. Then, 200 years after we lit our star, an alert chimed in an observatory on Titan. It was a soft sound, a familiar sound. A young astronomer stared at her screen. She saw a flicker, a star thousands of light years away, in a direction opposite our nebula. It was not a natural flicker. It was too precise, too structured. It pulsed with a complex rhythm, a rhythm based on prime numbers, a rhythm we recognized. It was not the language of the first warning. It was new. But it was unmistakably a message. It was a reply. A new light had flickered in the distance. It was a message meant just for us. Humanity was not alone after all, and our conversation with the universe had only just begun.